All right, so let's take a look at the at a standard example of a multiple choice question. Let's get the right size in here first and make sure that everybody can see it really good. Now, in terms of the standard, this one is about the development of museums, and this is coming from the Cambridge Books number 9, test 4, reading passage 3. Okay, like I've told you, get those Cambridge books. They're great, best practice in the world. Use them, and it's going to help you get a really great score. All right, so let's look at the standard multiple choice question when it comes to the reading comprehension. So here we go. We have 31, 32, 33, 34, and 35, and 36. So these questions go in order. All right, they go in order. And so, like I said, first thing we want to look at which questions are going to be the easiest for us to do first. Which ones are going to be the easiest for us to do first? And so when we're talking about which ones are easiest for us to do first, I would say number 33, where it talks about heritage sites and theme parks. Those are good words to find. Number 32, where it talks about the heritage industry and current trends. That's going to be pretty easy to find. Number 35, it gives us the exact paragraph, paragraph E. That one's probably going to be pretty easy to find also. Okay? So if I were doing the real exam, I would probably do 32, 33, and then 35. And then that will let me know where the other questions are. Because as I've told you, a multiple choice question, the standard multiple choice question goes in order. That means, they go in order of the passage. And by now, I know you've listened to a lot of my lectures, and so you understand what I mean by going in order. 32 comes after 31, 33 comes after 32, so forth and so on. So let's go and try to find number 32 first. We have to now go and scan. We can look at some of the answer choices, and we see we're talking about emphasizing personal involvement, origins in New York and London, computer images, or minority taste. All right, those will be some of the keywords in the answer choices, but let's go ahead and find our matching sentence, current trends and the heritage industry. All right, here's our language right here, where it talks about recently, which means currently, and here we have the terms of heritage is right here. All right, and so we actually have a combination of these two sentences that is making our question up. All right, we have these two sentences as making our question. So it says, recently, however, attitudes towards history. I'm reading right here at B. Recently, however, attitudes towards history and the way it should be presented have altered. The key word in heritage display is now experience. The more exciting, the better, and if possible, involving all the senses. All right, let me double check that that's our keyword sentence. Current trends, current trends in the heritage industry. Current trends. Current trends. All right. Yeah. The keyword in heritage display is now personal. Okay, sorry about that pause. I had to go and grab some water. Your teacher was losing his voice a little bit. Sorry about that. Okay, all right, so let's go back. Yeah, these are keyword sentences right here. Recently, however, attitudes towards history and the way it should be presented have altered. The keyword in heritage display is now experience. The more exciting, the better, and if possible, involving all the senses. So when we look back at number 32, the current trends in the heritage industry, the correct answer is number A. Emphasize personal involvement. Because it says that it should involve all the senses. When it says it should involve all the senses, that's synonym language for meaning personal involvement. All right. Also, when you find the matching sentence, all the other answers look wrong. There's nothing about York and London. There's nothing about computer images, and there's nothing about reflecting minority taste. So we know that B, C, and D are wrong. That's why it's so important. That's why it's so important for you to be able to find your matching sentence. The better you are at being able to find your matching sentence, the better you're going to be able to do these types of questions. All right, now let's look at number 33. Heritage sites and theme parks. Work in close partnership, separate identities, similar exhibits, less easy to distinguish. All right, so that's some of the information I need to look out for when I find the right sentence. It goes in order, so I know it has to come after. Now here it is right here. I know it has to come after this sentence. It has to come after this question right here from this part. And here we have heritage sites and theme parks. So that's our matching sentence right there. Okay? That's our matching sentence. That's the only sentence where we're going to see heritage sites and theme park together. In a related development, the sharp distinction between museum and heritage sites on the one hand and theme parks on the other is gradually evaporating. So it's telling us the distinction between the two is gradually evaporating. The distinction between a heritage site and a theme park is gradually evaporating. Evaporating means going away. So we look at number 33. Which one matches that information? The answer is D. Less easy to distinguish than before. Less easy to distinguish than before, right? Because it says that it's gradually evaporating. The distinction between the heritage site and the theme park is gradually evaporating. The synonym answer for that is choice D. Less easy to distinguish than before. So see, you have to pay attention to synonym language. Paying attention to synonym language is very, very important. I know where 32 and 33 are, right? So now I know that number 31 has to come before 32 and 34 comes after 33. So it makes it a little bit easier to find where these other questions are located. So let's go ahead and find number 31. Compare with today's museums, those of the past. Compare with today's museums, those of the past. Now, if you want to, you don't have to look at the keywords and the answer choices. That's a step that is you can do that, but it's not really that relevant or important. If you want to, you can go directly to the sentence and read it and then pick your answer. Compare with today's museums, those of the past. So that's what I'm looking for. And it has to come before paragraph B because paragraph B was for question number 32. All right, here we go. Museums used to look. Right? Museums used to look. So this museums used to look. That tells me that's the right sentence because our question is saying compare with today's museums of the past. So when it talks about museums used to look, right, that's talking about museums in the past. That's how I know that's the right sentence. Right, so it says museums used to look and some still do, much like storage room objects, packed together in showcases. Good for scholars who wanted to study the subtle differences in design, but not for the ordinary visitor to whom it all looked alike. Right? A big storage room of objects packed together. Good for the scholar, but not for the ordinary visitor who it all looked alike to. Right, so for number 31, our correct answer is B. Were not primarily intended for the public. Because when we looked at that sentence, that sentence says that it was museums used to be or used to look, and some still do, like a big storage locker. And it said it was good for the professionals, but it was not good for the average visitor because everything looked the same. So the synonym answer for that is that in the past, it was not primarily intended for the public, right? That's the only answer. Choice B is the only answer we can pull from those sentences, right? Did not present history in a detailed way. We can't say that. Or more clearly organized. We know that's false. Preserved items with greater care. We don't know that, okay? We don't know that. The answer the answer that comes from the sentence is choice B. Okay, now let's look at number 34. The writer says that in preparing exhibits for museums, experts should. Right. So in preparing, what should the experts do in preparing exhibits for museums? What should they do? All right. So let's have a look at that and see. We know it comes after 33. And as a reminder, 33 was from right here in paragraph C, so it has to come after that. And we're scanning for where it talks about preparing an exhibit. All right, so here is talking about them. Here is talking about them preparing. Starting right here where it talks about heritage. All right, this is where we're talking about. All right, this is where we're talking about. All right, so with a multiple choice question, what sometimes makes it difficult also is sometimes for a multiple choice question, like I've told you, you have to read more than one sentence sometimes for a multiple choice question to be able to get it right. All right, so let's take a look again at our question for number 34. The writer says that in preparing exhibits for museums, experts must. What must they do? All right, so look right here. It says those who are professionally engaged in the art of interpreting history. Right, when it's talking about that, it's talking about them. When it says professionally engaged, they're talking about experts in the art of interpreting history. They're talking about them preparing an exhibit. All right, that's what they're talking about there. They're talking about them preparing an exhibit. Okay. All right, and you could have started right here where it talks about museum experts do not have to invent stories and recreate historical environments. The assets are already in place. But this is our sentence right here. Those who are professionally engaged in the art of interpreting history are thus in a difficult position, as they must steer a narrow course between the demands of evidence and attractiveness. Right? So they have to, when they are preparing an exhibit, when they're interpreting history, which is another way of saying preparing an exhibit. This question 34 is a really challenging question because they're using a lot of synonym language here for the right sentence. And this is coming in reading passage 3. And as I told you in the very beginning, reading passage 3, a lot of times it's going to be the more difficult question. It's going to have the more difficult questions because they're trying to separate a person who can get a score of an 8 or 9 from a person who can get a score of a 6 or 7. So a lot of times in reading passage 3, that's where you're going to find the more difficult questions. So again, it says, those who are professionally engaged in the art of interpreting history are thus in a difficult position, as they must steer a narrow course between the demands of evidence and attractiveness. So they have to decide between two things. And our correct answer is going to be D. Right? Have to balance conflicting priorities. They have to balance conflicting priorities. All right, so I'm going to stop right there at number 34 for these multiple choice questions because I want to do another example for you. But I'm just trying to really give you I'm trying to give you an idea of how the strategy works for multiple choice questions. Sometimes you have to read more than one sentence to get a correct answer. But the important thing to remember is this question goes in order, and you have to be able to find the sentence that the question is coming from, and then read that sentence and possibly the next sentence to be able to get the correct answer choice for these multiple choice questions. But the good thing is that they go in order, and that's something that can be very, very helpful in terms of doing this type of question. Okay? I'll talk to you soon.